Welcome back to Nerd Thug Radio. We were reminiscing to our summer camp days there with that trendy rendition of the Star Spangled Banner.
Who's that by, Nico? Who was that?
I don't know who that is.
Okay.
Just some rando.
Some rando
Some
with
guy
a guitar.
Just some rando.
We Google too much stuff.
We do. I'm the Captain Joey Savage.
Corey DLG.
Nico DLG.
You're listening to us on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1.
The sister
And
station.
worldwide at
IRLoneStar.com. I'm stuck in my wires.
You can catch us every Monday
Save yourself.
on the radio from 1 to 3. If you miss any of it, check nerdthugradio.com or facebook.com/nerdthugradio as we podcast this stuff, and you can listen to it. We're getting towards the end of the show here. We got a couple segments left.
Is that true?
It is true. And in
Oh
this
my
segment, we call it the Nico DLG segment because everyone tunes out.
Right.
So, Nico.
Hold on, I'm pulling up everything.
Show me what you got.
Oh no, giant head. I have to show me what I got. I gotta get swifty.
Show us what you got, sir. What is
All right.
your Nico segment?
Alright, hold on, I gotta... Hey guys, Nico DLG here.
I waited all day
coming
to
at
use
you
that.
live. So today, I want to talk about some serious issues. The hard-hitting stuff.
The hard-hitting stuff. Okay?
Alright, here we go.
The hard stuff, like.
Alright, so we have... I don't know if we've all watched it, but 13 Reasons Why was a recent
Oh,
Netflix
God,
series
we're gonna
that came
go
out.
I'm alright
Okay.
with this. What do we got? Go.
Alright,
I
so...
know what you're going with here.
Go.
So
I want to hear this.
they've been in some hot water,
Hot waters.
some hot waters because there was 2 girls recently that have committed suicide, and they had recently watched the show. So the parents are then coming to Netflix and being like, "Your show glorifies suicide."
I haven't watched this series.
Me either.
I've read the book.
And the book I know does the opposite of glorify suicide.
No, it does the opposite, complete opposite.
Right.
It paints it as a complete tragedy, and that everyone involved is incredibly depressed and sad. It paints it in a terrible light because it's what suicide is. It's a
Right.
terrible thing that someone does.
And my understanding of the show actually also did very similarly the same. It worked really hard. They were very
to
worried
portray
about
the message.
Right,
To portray
exactly.
the message. So, kind of what I wanted to bring this to was, what can a show? What I think is that people are far too sensitive when it comes to like these serious topics and shows that come up, whether it be drug abuse, maybe eating disorders. Because there's a recent another Netflix movie that is getting some hot water about that. Like the
Right.
trailer came out,
Right.
and
Keanu Reeves plays a therapist in it.
oh really?
Yeah.
Now I need to watch it because I
Nice.
love Keanu Reeves.
It's actually John Wick, not Keanu Reeves.
Oh man,
Yeah,
I should have
imagine
known.
That would be an intense therapy session.
Don't touch my dog.
No, I feel much better. Thank you.
All right, Nico.
I appreciate it.
Show us what you got.
All right, what I got. So, what do you think is too far for a TV show to explore like such a bad issue, or
Well, here,
like,
let me-
an issue that troubles people?
Let me start it from this, because I think you're too young to realize this. But I say that sometimes to you about stuff. I wonder how you feel about that when I say that. But the truth is, you're too young to realize, like, when Columbine happened, what was it? You and I, this was our age.
Yep.
We were seniors in high school when this happened. And what was the thing they immediately went to? They went to Marilyn Manson and Dungeons and Dragons
Video game.
and video games.
Right.
They immediately went to those because that's what those kids liked. And it was like, that's what every kid liked back then. Every kid
Did you
listened
ever
to
see
Marilyn
the movie
Manson.
Elephant? There's a movie called Elephant
Okay.
that came out maybe 3 to 4 years after Columbine. and
Okay,
it was
okay.
basically the same scenario.
All right.
That's what this movie was about. It was like a fictitious version of that.
Okay. And there was a writer who was under the impression that he wanted to write about the families of bad people in recent history. People like the Columbine shooters. People like that. That everyone can kind of universally agree something's wrong with them.
Right.
So let's investigate and look into their family lives and see what happens. One of the 2 Columbine shooters was featured in that book. One of the families completely moved away from the city. They don't want
left.
anything to do with it.
Got out.
They don't want anything to do with the story. They didn't want to talk to the guy. The other family stayed in the city, dealt with the tragedy as part of the community, and they willingly let this guy come in and said, look, you know, we're a little worried about what you want to do, but we're willing to talk about it. We understand that this
right.
had an impact on history. So they did. They talked to the guy, and he said he thought that he would be able to walk in and immediately notice
Figure out.
a difference in them. He would immediately walk in and see why it was so
Right,
why it got
why
so
this
bad
kid
so
did
fast.
what he did.
Right.
Right.
Instead, he said he walked in and they were everyone else. They were just like everyone else, and they clearly loved their kid. They clearly cared about their kid. They clearly wanted to help their kid, and they don't. There's not a real reason when grapes go bad. They don't.
There's too many people.
There's all kinds of factors that statistically are
Right,
involved,
right.
like when you do your giant studies, but when you go individual by individual by individual, there's no correlation.
No.
So what happens is society blames these big things like Marilyn Manson, things like drugs.
Also,
and
to add to your thing, especially because I read this story, and this was one of the things that triggered me to no longer read any kind of news and
Triggered.
get away from it. I think a lot of times human nature is they want to find something to blame things on.
Yeah, because
And
it's way easier if you can
It's
blame
way
something.
easier to cope if you blame. Like, if these parents, they're going to blame it on the show, it's their way of coping, trying to make themselves feel better that their kids, weren't as, didn't do something as dumb as they did, I guess. I mean, I won't say dumb, but
well, yeah, because let's be really clear. Like, and I don't want to speak specifically and harmfully here, but in general, if someone commits suicide, there are typically psychological and personal factors involved.
Right.
There's not going to be an outside influence that paints suicide so wonderfully that if you weren't already thinking about it or on
Right.
the edge or in that area of consideration, that you're now going to go that way. Like if you're happy and you see 13 Reasons Why, you're not going to immediately go, hey, you know what? I wonder what suicide's like.
Right.
I don't feel like that is a fair assessment of what they're doing there.
Right.
And to go back to your original question, I don't think that there's an issue that can't be talked about.
right. No, there is.
It just depends on how you do it. I mean, there was a movie famously 13.
Yep. Oh,
where
man, that's a good movie.
It was a good movie, and it features this girl who's 13 years old and just pushes all
True story.
boundaries and just kind of falls out of herself and just gets crazy and just
It was based on a true story.
and it just gets she just gets way out of hand.
It's
and,
the chick that was famously married or dating Marilyn Manson.
yeah, that was the girl, the actress
Right.
in the movie. Yeah,
So basically, in that movie, this writer who looked 13ish,
right.
she went to this high school or junior high, maybe, I guess, at
Yeah.
13, and followed these two girls, became friends with them, and spent a couple months with them, and then came back and wrote this movie based upon her experiences.
And
And
she
it-
probably exaggerates things, but
Right.
like they get into drugs, they're
And they're 13,
underage
right.
stuff. Like it's just a lot of stuff going on in that movie. But the reality is, yeah, you want to kind of perfect example. The singer just died, Chris Cornell.
Okay.
His wife has really struggled with the fact that it's apparently a drug
Induced
suicide.
Right.
And she is really, just very recently, did she release some quotes that said, I clearly missed signs that my husband had relapsed.
Right.
But coming up to that, she didn't want to believe that at all. She was demanding autopsies. She was saying other people were to blame. She was saying something else happened.
Yeah, when stuff like that happens, especially like with the Columbine, they want to blame all other things. Is people get together and they want to find there's got to be an outside source that's,
And you know
that's
what's-
pushing these people to it. When quite frankly, there's stuff. The mind and the brain is such a weird,
A young
and
especially.
is complicated thing. And
Right.
I think Nico, me and you have talked about this somewhat as well. Like people, you can for me, it's like I can be as happy as I can be one minute, and then the smallest thing,
You can have like a thought, and then it's like it
it ruins my whole day, or you fester upon it. And the mind is such a weird thing that hasn't been fully developed, or
right, especially when they're so young.
and so yeah, when you're young and bad things start happening and they're a bigger deal than what you think they are, and then you might get some outside stuff, but by no means is it video games that cause it to happen, or Marilyn Manson that caused
No,
it
as
to
a
happen,
matter
or
of
this
fact-
TV show that caused it to
As a matter of
happen.
fact, they've done massive studies on huge scales, and they find no correlation between video games and teen violence. They find no correlation between what movies and content
Right.
they watch and teen violence. They don't find the correlations that the outrage groups suggest exist.
What it is you get adults and parents, specifically when it involves kids, and they have to find a reason.
Yeah, because it's
what
hard.
happened.
It's hard. Well, it's hard for most people. You and I,
Right.
This is an art that we're doing in a way. We're artists. I roll my eyes as I say that, but
I'm
but
an
we,
artist.
But we know that what we're doing can always be better, and it's never perfect. And so we're always critiquing ourselves and each other and pushing each other to be better. But we accept that, and there are people who can't accept that they aren't doing the best they can do. And so you'll hear people you'll know people who aren't doing the best at something, and then you'll hear them from their point of view think that they're the best at it or doing the best that they
Right.
can, and you're like, how can you think you're a good parent when you're not home 5 days a week? Like what?
Well, then it's also when you get into these filmmakers and stuff. A lot of times when they make movies that push these issues, it kind of helps bring that issue to
the
light,
forefront.
Right, right,
Like,
and that's probably helping a
Discussion-
lot of people
this
too.
discussion wouldn't happen. I mean,
right. Like there's a movie that came out in the early '90s entitled "Kids." You ever seen that
Yes,
movie?
yeah.
And at the time, basically, it deals with the AIDS epidemic in New York and among young people. And because of that movie, it kind of brought a limelight to that, to the AIDS forefront, like, oh wow, this is an issue. We
Mm-hmm.
we need to tackle it as a community or as a nation or whatever. So I mean, there's always good and bad in everything. It's just how it's perceived by the individual.
Also, I think one thing that's really hard for, and I'm not going to say victims, but like the families of the people involved, like the victims, it's not their fault. If they're really victims, they didn't have anything to do with it. That's what a victim means. But like the families of the people involved in these things, in suicides and stuff like that, it's hard to accept that they may have been a factor in it. Like I personally, my personal belief, and I apologize if someone's offended by this, but my personal belief, like on Columbine, is that one of the key contributing factors were the other students and the school. If those kids were really being as bullied as bad as the stories that came out later about
Right.
that they were dealing with things so bad that they felt so isolated and felt so alone, then that directly means that those kids,
Right.
those
They
kids
were
played a role
failed.
in it. Those
Yeah.
kids weren't helping their peers, and the school wasn't protecting those kids.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the outcome was appropriate. I'm
No,
just
not
saying
by
that
any means.
I'm just
Nerd
saying
Thug
that
does
one
not
of the
condone it.
no one of the main ingredients though was the behavior of the community.
Right.
And so you have to when something bad happens, you have to accept at least your part in it.
Right.
And that's hard for people to do though.
Wow, this might be one of the
A realist.
realist
Yeah.
segments that Nerd Thug Radio's done.
Nerd Thug gets real.
Nerd Thug gets real. We were getting so real that I need to take a break.
All right.
I gotta simmer down now. We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna wrap this show up. We've had several people ask us to talk about hero clicks, and so that's what we're gonna do to close the show out. Stay tuned. God bless America.